I've wanted to make a tincture, and I say tincture rather than sloe gin, which is obviously the most common use for sloes if you're going to pick them, because they're far too tart to just eat. Although I have put some in my hedgerow jelly along with other things, because they'll mix with other things, and it's kind of symbolic really to include as much as possible out of the hedgerow. So I have used them there, but usually I wouldn't be using them for anything much. And I have made sloe gin in the past, but because I don't really drink as such, and also it can be quite full of sugar, I haven't been making it for a while. So what I'm going to make with these, I've decided, after walking past them so many times and not picking them, sort of waiting for the frost when they're supposed to get softer and better to use, you haven't got to prick them, and all the advantages of waiting for a frost. Well, there hasn't actually been one yet, although you wouldn't believe it how my fingers are really hurting. I'm not going to stay out here much longer, but it is going to apparently snow a little bit this next week, but I'm not going to wait for that. I decided I'm just going to pick some. Don't need too many for a tincture, just putting some in a jar. I'll show you what I've picked actually. There we are, this is what I've picked so far, and I'm not going to need too many more really. I'm just going to put them into one jar. My fingers probably look numb because they are. I'll put that back down on the verge. Anyway, I was just going to tell you about it because it's just something you can do if you haven't got many of something but you want to extract the qualities of them. And in the case of sloes, they have got vitamin C. They're kind of slightly less potent medicine perhaps than elderberry in terms of winter colds and flu, but they still have got very good antiviral properties. And as well as that, the sort of scientific medicinal uses, you might want to think about taking in their qualities of tenacity and protectiveness and so on. So if you just wanted to take a teaspoonful or two per day, could be quite good for that in a kind of spiritual or magical sense, as well as being a good protective against viruses and the nasty colds and so on, at the very least, that we sometimes can be prey to at this time of year. So anyway, without further ado, and aren't they pretty, by the way, now that most of the leaves are off, and it's my favourite little aesthetic of the year, when you've just got a few leaves clinging on like the fairy bunting. As I always say, I've probably said it about a million times, but I always think of it like that, and all little fairy lights almost, because on the blackthorn in particular, they stay a very lime yellowy green, which I think is very pretty and goes really nicely as well with the sloes. It's chillier than I even thought it was actually, because I'm not wearing gloves. It's easier to pick that way, and I'm going to not stay out very much longer, so I'll just fill my calendar, I think, more or less. I think I've got nearly enough anyway, because I don't want to make too much. I was just going to make a jar, and you put about 2/3 of the jar full, I should imagine, for this, and then I'll just top up to the top with some vodka, because that's really good for extracting the properties, and also hopefully the colour will be nice as well. It'll turn pink, which I shall show you in due course. And traditionally, what you would do is you'd prick all the sloes to make sure the juices run when you make sloe gin. But this year in particular, they're very tiny, the sloes, because it's been so dry, and so it will be a huge amount of work. And a kind of hack for this is just to put them in the freezer for a couple of hours, and then when you take them out and they defrost, the skins will just burst a little bit, and it has the same effect of helping the juices to run. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I should say that, thinking about wildlife, there's plenty left for wildlife, and actually sloes are not very popular. I think it's probably because they're so bitter, and they do only go, I noticed, that once there's just nothing else for the birds, they will have a go at them, but often they just wither on the blackthorn bushes, which is quite sad. When I got home, I washed the sloes, and then I froze them, as I said I was going to, and then I defrosted them after, I don't know, it was a few hours, which is why it's evening now, and They took a little while to defrost, but now they're really squidgy, and the juice is starting to run from them as well. So that's exactly how you want them, and that will do part of the work because they will start to release their juices. And the colour of well, I'm using vodka. You could use any other spirits. Or you could use gin, which would make it like sloe gin, but without the sugar in terms of the kind of flavour, I suppose. Or you can use brandy or whiskey as well. But I like the idea of using the vodka because I think the colour will be pretty. Not that that's the main thing, of course. I ought to just say also quickly that I'm not a trained herbalist. So just, that's just my disclaimer. Anyone can make a tincture like this, but you want to consult a qualified herbalist if you have got a medical condition, or if you want to make a tincture that will help a specific medical condition. You need to consult somebody knowledgeable. I'm just making this as a kind of what you might call a folk remedy. What I'm going to do, it's not complicated. I'm just going to put the sloes into the jar here and then tip into it. Fill it up to the top, in fact, with the vodka. So just also to say, it's quite good not to use a jar. To use a jar where metal isn't going to touch the contents, because over time it could corrode metal. And this is a kind of glass jar, so the metal parts don't touch. But because you usually would just let it infuse for about 6 weeks, that shouldn't be a problem. It's only if you were going to leave it there for 6 months or something like that, so it might be a good idea to be careful if you use an ordinary jam jar, because you could make just a really small quantity in a jam jar. It would still be definitely worth doing if you could just find a few sloes. So it looks as if there's enough just to fill it to the top. Yes, there is, which is good. Just a drop left, but that's covered the sloes really well. So you can see. You need to just shake it every so often when you remember to, and as I say, let them infuse for perhaps about 4 to 6 weeks. You could put it just somewhere. I've got a cupboard that I'm going to use, but just somewhere not too hot, not too cold. It's a good idea to check it every so often to make sure that it's not evaporated too much, and it makes sure it's covering the fruit. Although there's not a problem here. This jar's only it's probably half to 2/3 full, which is ideal. And you want to make sure that if fruit is floating to the top, that's difficult to say, fruit is floating to the top, that if you keep shaking it to make sure that it gets submerged again. And that's it. So I meant to say as well, if you wanted a recommendation for a good channel on YouTube for someone who is a real herbalist, I've mentioned her before, but Terry at Danu's Irish Herb Garden. I really like that channel, and she has lots of ideas for herbal remedies and beauty products and all sorts of things, actually. So that's a really good one. I don't really follow a lot of YouTube channels, but I do always look at that one. And also, I also like, and I mentioned her before as well, Colette at the Cottage, and that's another recommendation. So I'll put those two. If you don't know them already, I'll pop them both into the discussion underneath. Oh, another thing you should do, which I haven't done, I will try and make a note to myself to do, is to make sure you label it with what it is and the date you did it, because after a while, these jars of liquid like this could look very much the same, and you think you'll remember which date you've done something, and I find that I don't, unless it was something like Michaelmas or a memorable date like that, or St. Martin's Day or something, then I would remember. But otherwise, yes, it's all too easy to forget how long it's been brewing. That's not the right word, distilling. I'm not even sure that's the right word, but how long you've been making it for. I'll give it a shake to start it off, and then get it into the cupboard. It's mid-afternoon and it's already getting a bit dusk, but that's probably because it's, you can see this dark cloud, it's drizzling a little bit. So I've got a job to do out here. But in the meantime, I just wanted to quickly bring you across this part of the garden, which is, you know, it's how it was really, but I've just tidied a little bit here. I've pulled out as many bindweed roots as I could and disentangled them from these trees. Makes you realise what I can do and will do as well. I mean, it actually whet my appetite for doing more. But anyway, I wanted to just show you, I keep talking about planting my little blackcurrant bush, and here it is planted. Lots of nice garden compost around it underneath as well. So hopefully that will grow away. You can see it's already got buds on it. I love seeing the buds coming already for next year on lots of the trees and bushes as well, of course. So anyway, just a quick look at that, and then I'll show you what I've got to do in just a moment. I don't intend to be out here for too long because it is actually raining. You can see the water landing in the water butt there. What I'm going to do is to cut some willow, which I'll just show you, because there's some willow in the garden here, in this bed here. When I put in the trees along the back, the little baby native hedging trees, some of them got healed in just here, and they were just basically never moved. So here they are still. They are mostly willow, and there was a wild rose, and here it's beautiful. It's got lovely, beautiful big hips. I shall be using some of those as well, actually. But anyway, where the willows are, and they're now growing over the path, and I needed to cut them back anyway, I'm going to cut some of the whippy stems and weave them around to make a wreath. In fact, I'm going to make 2 wreaths. You can see where I cut it last year, just there. It's actually a good example of a pollard, which just shows you what will happen with willow when you cut it. It'll just put out more stems. Oh, it's raining a bit harder now. I should talk more quickly. Yes, so I've got to cut some of this. I wanted to make a Christmas wreath anyway, but also sadly my mother-in-law passed away recently, and it's her funeral tomorrow. When my late husband's brothers asked me what flowers I thought Jane would like, I said that I knew that she would just like natural things from the garden and hedgerows, and I was intending to make a natural wreath from willow and just weave in hedgerow finds and whatever I could find in the garden. So it's tomorrow, and so it's a good time to make it now so it will be fresh. And I'm going to just cut this willow, and I'll show you the things that I found down the lane as well. I just went for a little walk just a few minutes ago to see what I could find. My Christmas wreath for the house will be, or for outside the house, will be a bit different, but basically I'll do the same kind of framework, and both of them will have rosemary, because Jane's will be rosemary for remembrance, and rosemary was always traditionally put into greenery for Christmas decorations, bay and rosemary. And I've got a big bay tree, so I should be putting bay in as well into the one for the old shop. So I'll make a few differences between them. But basically but it's interesting to think that something which is to commemorate someone's spirit passing into the other world could have a similar aesthetic to something which is celebrating a birth in many ways. Whether you see that as the birth of the Christ child or the birth of the Son heralding a new season, a new year, it's still got that feeling about it of a new beginning. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting that I'd naturally thought of something similar for both of them. Yesterday evening I just collected cut it in the garden, the willow, and I twisted it into a rough wreath, and as you can see it is pretty rough, but it is complete, and it's quite strong. I had to just tied it at the first end, and you can see there's some sticking out bits, but once I've covered it, twisted some ivy around it, that will hopefully look a bit better, look a bit more regular shaped. I know this is something a lot of people do to make a wreath, but I'm going to be making this one at lightning speed because I'm going to make 2 in total, but I need this one for today. So, and this is the one for the funeral. I haven't actually got very long, as ever. I've left it very last minute, but I think that might even be all to the good because it'll be spontaneous. And Jane was a very spontaneous person, She was the kind of person who would run out to look at a rainbow and jump into a puddle, and she loved things that were wild and free and natural, and she loved plants and flowers. So it'll be very appropriate for her, and I'll just do it now and then I'll show you the finished thing. So I'm not going to be fixing anything, it's all just going to be twisted in and pushed into the base. And although it doesn't look very promising at the moment, I think it will do what I'm hoping it will do. So, and it's the spirit in which it's been done in as well that counts. Jane lived by the sea in Norfolk, and she loved its changing colours and moods. Although it was drizzling while I made the wreath, while I was driving to the funeral, the sky became blue and the sun came out, and a big rainbow arced right across in front of me. The funeral was a Quaker meeting where anyone can speak, as it moves them to do so, and right at the end I felt I just had to stand up and recount that I'd kind of tried to explain Jane in as much as that was possible by saying that she loved to jump into puddles and to run out to look at a rainbow, and that I'd seen the rainbow as I drove, and the sun has come out, and so many people came up to me afterwards and said they had seen that very same rainbow. And it was just a very poignant moment where people bonded and understood really what they'd all seen. It's a day of brilliant sunshine, and it's the middle of the day, which means the sun's actually getting into the front garden. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to have just a look round. I don't suppose a huge amount's changed since we last had a look, although it was some time ago now. But what's been happening is everything's been gradually sinking into the ground for the winter. But it's as well to have a look now and again, so we can kind of keep a check on how that process happens. And some of the things I think I was mentioning before, how much I like to see the new buds for next year, but that's on the ribes, which is the ornamental currant, and that's always very early to flower, so I suppose that's why it gets started very quickly. I don't think it's because of the weather conditions, because it hasn't been especially different from normal. It hasn't been frosty particularly, but we have had a lot of cold and wet. So, we had a frost last night and also the night before, which is really why it's so wet. You can see all the wets down there. It's not because it's rained. Well, it has rained, but not in the last I don't know. I lose track. It didn't rain yesterday and it's not rained today. It is the melted frost which doesn't actually dry out because, it's December. So we'll have a quick look. It's fairly self-explanatory. I think it's just this lovely cheering sight of the new leaves coming even now, ready for the new season. And actually there's something which is different, because not only has this bright child got a cloak made by my lovely neighbour up the road, but as of yesterday he also has a felt hat with very jaunty leaves in the top, also made by Justine. So lovely of her, and he looks so cosy. I think it actually sets off his greenness even more. He does look very elfin, probably because he is. So yeah, I thought you might like to say hello to him. The frog, of course, is also looking green, but then he always looks green because he's a frog, and he's probably more mossy, even more mossy at the moment. There have been a lot of leaves down, which are carpeting the ground and acting as a mulch, so they're keeping everything together and also adding their own nutrition as they break down. Lots of stems and old seed heads, flower heads. I haven't actually seen the frost on them yet. It hasn't been a very severe frost yet here, and of course this front garden is quite sheltered. But you can see all the more how things are dying back, because you can actually see the pond down there now, for example, which I haven't done anything to clear out yet. I don't think I will. I think I'll let it take its course over the winter and then sort it all out in the spring. There's still leaves on the hazel, again probably because it's sheltered here, and you can have the lovely colours, which is something that's actually disappearing everywhere else in the woodland, on the trees at least. They're still underfoot, because it's a bit, especially in the last few days, there's been a big difference and most of the trees are bare now. On sunny days like this, the grass is lovely still. I'm really pleased with those. They are just delightful, I think. And the bird bath, I've refilled that to give the birds some clean water. And obviously when it freezes, I shall make sure it's kept broken the ice as much as I can, unless it's frozen completely solid. But it wasn't frozen today, so again I think that shows how sheltered it is, because there's some water in the back garden, just in a tub. It's collected, like rainwater collected there, and that was frozen. When the light's like this in the front garden, as it only is for a really short time each day, around the middle of the day, it's really nice to come out and have a look at things like these stones, the big stones I have, which this one came from the Devil's Chair in Shropshire, the Stiper stones. And this one here, which I call the Dragon Stone, which came from the Lizard in Cornwall. So they are really special stones to me. They've got very, very, very poignant memories and lovely memories. And they do form a sort of portal that you step through, which I really like the idea of their energies. Quite different parts of the country that they come from. They're both very different from Norfolk. So I liked the kind of blending of those energies and traditions. I'll just show you how blue the sky is today. It's really, really lovely, and the forecast is it will stay like this all day, which probably means it'll be a really cold evening. I've got the fire laid already in the stove, ready for later. You can see how the leaves have come off the big oak tree there actually as we pan round. And the hedge is looking very unruly, but hopefully I get that sorted out before too long. I don't know if you can even see all the little insects. You might be able to, just dancing around in front there. Again, I think they've just come out because of the sunshine, and it's lovely to see them actually. I should say I haven't seen so much of the sparrows who used to be very, very prevalent here and play around in the garden all the time. I think that's partly because there's the back garden, which was a completely barren wasteland for quite a while. That's now got the trees growing, of course, and the hedges grown up a lot, and I think they spend more time at the back as well as the front now, whereas they only had the front here for their playground. And of course they were being fed as well, which I haven't been doing, but I am thinking of putting the bird table back up. Can't quite decide whether to or not. I know it's a really good idea. It was just those rats were so they were just so cheeky basically, and it's so close to the house because it's a tiny garden. So I think I probably will, and then I can always move it if things get a bit out of hand. And yeah, I think I'll do that. So again, when I've got that in situ, because I've still got the feeders and food, in fact, I'll get that set up, and then we can have a look at that in another video.